Hey everyone, and welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva. Today, joining me on the Private Podcast is Danny Zuckerman. Danny is the co founder of Threebox, the company behind the Ceramic Network, which is a network for permissionless data composability, something that can transform the way we build applications and connect users to their data in new and exciting ways. And now, over to the conversation with Danny Zuckerman. Terrific. And as I said just a few seconds ago, we have Danny Zuckerman here with us in the private podcast. Danny, thanks so much for spending some time with us here to record what will hopefully be a great interview and get Ceramic and Three Box in front of more people's eyes
Thanks for having me, Derek. Excited to talk.
and their ears. This is
Yeah.
primarily audio. Not a lot of people watch the video. So, can you tell us a little bit about your early career pre-blockchain and how you eventually ended up in blockchain, crypto, Web3, whatever your preferred term is these days?
Yeah, for sure. So I think of myself mostly as having a product background, but the journey was a little bit more winding than that. I had studied political philosophy in college, which kind of come back to, but always been really interested in how people work together. After school, I joined Bain and Company, a consulting firm, and spent about 2.5 years helping mostly Fortune 100 tech companies in the Bay Area think through organizational design, governance plans, some IT road mapping, but really just kind of an early get a sense of how big companies work. Then I wanted to get much closer to startups. I'd been growing up in the Bay Area, was always close to tech and to startups, but hadn't built anything. Joined a digital education company in New York City that was really trying to build kind of the first education technology that was meant to be used in the classroom, partner with teachers, and really help close the achievement gap. Was the first product manager there. Joined when there was kind of an idea, and one pilot school signed up in Brooklyn, and we grew it to a few million students using the platform every month in basically every district in the country.
Oh,
And that was in like 2016 or so. Decided to take some time and figure out if education was where I really wanted to be. I had loved the education space, but had loved building products more, and even more than that, had loved building teams. And that kind of thinking and reflection led me to just explore a bunch of spaces, including after years of basically ignoring blockchain and anything about it, figure out what the hell blockchain was. And what clicked for me is I see this set of technologies as the best coordination tools we've ever had. Again, political philosophy, so how people work together at the broadest scales. Love building teams at small startups, thinking about org design and governance in between. It's just fascination with how can people coordinate and work together better. And that's what hooked me and got me into the space. As I explored the space 2016, 17, um, it was almost all engineers. It was almost all financial use cases and tokens. But the promise that really hooked me was the Web3 vision, the vision of a web where data follows us around as users. Things are much more interoperable and composable. Just a very different internet
yeah.
than we're used to. But the pillars to build on that didn't exist yet, and so that's what I've been working on since then.
Yeah, this often promised idea of being able to take all your data from Facebook and take it to, a new social media firm or same with Twitter or Google Plus when that when that was still a thing. Or, a number of failed ones like I was talking the other day to somebody about Kevin Rose and I couldn't remember his attempt at a social network at the time, but I remembered later it was called Pounce, which I
Hmm.
loved. Like I used a lot with a few friends. Pounce, Path, whole bunch of other ones. Like just you know, for a little while could get the data from Facebook or Twitter or what have you or MySpace. Was able to pull a little data in, seed your network, etc. And then, of course, inevitably the APIs get shut down, or that specific application gets cut off, and all of a sudden their growth is just gone. I remember the days when you could actually tweet to Facebook or, and probably vice versa, like, or like, yeah, post to Facebook from Twitter and probably vice versa. And of course, eventually Facebook's like, "Ooh, this is a threat. Like, we got to shut this down."
Yep.
Like, do you see anybody at this point using the technology that Threebox and Ceramic are providing in order to start building up that sort of thing? Like, are we hopefully finally heading towards, some of these Nirvana type applications we were hoping for 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think the examples you just mentioned are such interesting case studies because the whole problem is, well, A, they were dependent on these existing social graphs that eventually their access got cut off,
Hmm.
but also they were each independent things. They each had to build up their own social graph if they were going to have a life of their own, and that's
Yeah.
really hard to build up that kind of density to keep people around when they're so separate and so siloed. People don't want that many different applications. So what we're seeing now on Ceramic, which is the decentralized data platform for kind of composable data on Web3 that 3 Labs has built is, yes, a bunch of social networks that are sharing the same underlying data, including the social graph in the network. And so you can kind of think of a social network as a few different components that come together in different ways. It's a profile, it's your followers list, it's your feed.
Yeah.
And so we've got DNS.xyz and self ID and Orbis all sharing the same profile, and then Orbis and CyberConnect sharing a data model and the underlying connections for the social graph. They're working on that now. And so, what a really powerful thing is, it's not one application; it's a bunch of applications that share the same underlying data. And so that stuff comes with you, and they can each do a different thing, do it really well, and not have to build in their own silo.
You're gonna have to refresh my memory. So a few years ago, when I first heard about Three Box, I remember building up my Three Box profile and verifying a bunch of stuff, like connecting my Twitter and all that. Did that data eventually feed into Ceramic, or do I need to, now go back in and be like, yes, port this data to Ceramic, like assign some messages or something like that?
Yeah, so the really brief history is that we created 3 Labs to basically solve this problem of composable data on Web3, give developers a really good way to do it. The first the way that we did that is what you're referring to as the 3 SDK, which came with kind of easy APIs for developers to save profile, messaging, and just general kind of key value stored data, and for users to go see it and edit it, including their profile,
Hmm.
which you and thousands of others did. The what we realized in building that, and we kind of knew this going in, but we learned a lot about the limitations of the existing tech stack, and that led us to create Ceramic as a lower level protocol for basically decentralized databases because
Okay.
what we had built that SDK on just didn't scale. And so Ceramic is its own network. It is separate from kind of what 3 had run on. 3 SDK has been deprecated. And as a user, if you kind of use the key that you created a 3 account with, because everything works with blockchain accounts, blockchain keys,
Hmm.
um, and those to manage these DIDs, decentralized identifiers. If you go to an application that now uses Ceramic, it'll recognize your DID and ask you if you want to migrate your profile over from three
Okay.
bucks.
Cool.
And so, frankly, that's not the like there's a lot more usage on Ceramic today than there ever was on 3 bucks, even though 1,000 apps built on 3 bucks. And so we're really focused on Ceramic at this point as the scalable platform.
Yeah. No, I figured as much, which is why like I was asking the question about like how do I how do I move that? And so like that's there's it sounds like there's a path there, and I just need to go through your ecosystem, find something I want to use. I've heard of Orbis. I don't remember the last time I checked that out, but there are definitely some names I recognize in there, and so it's just a matter of me visiting and doing that migration path. So yeah, that sounds. If you've used it sounds like already it sounds like it's a fairly simple process.
Yeah, it
Can you tell
is.
us?
And
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
go for it.
I was gonna I was gonna ask you to tell us a little bit about the team at Three Box. So you talked you already said about why you started Three Box and sort of problems you're trying to solve. What about the rest of the team? Like, do you have co-founders? Who were the first couple of or at least the first types of people you were looking to hire and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the team is 25 now. I could have that wrong, give or take two at this point. Been growing pretty quickly recently. I've been working with my two co-founders for 4.5 years now, and they've actually been working together even longer than that. So Michael Senna was one of the founders of Uport, which for those who have been around
Oh
the
yeah.
space for a long time know it was like the first self-sovereign identity kind of project on Ethereum. What we did at Uport was really R&D into the early primitives that enable all of this. So the DID spec we helped create the decentralized identity foundation where a lot of this work and kind of collaboration happened. I think the very first or one of the very first users of IPFS. And so that was kind of and other things like I think the first proxy contract was built at Uport that became smart contract wallets later.
Yeah.
Um, and our other co-founder Joel Thorntonson has been in the space for actually even longer than Michael. He has contributed to a bunch of Ethereum standards, including identity standards, like 1088, I believe, is the ERC. And so, yeah, we've been working together on this problem space for a very long time. Along with that, we have some great protocol engineers from places like MongoDB and Oracle, some people from the startup world, and so a mix of really Web3 crypto native folks and kind of the best builders and product people that we found who really care about the same mission coming from more traditional data. So we are still hiring, of course. We're looking for a great product lead. We really believe that it's the mix of technology and the community that's going to make all of this work really well, not the technology alone,
Hmm.
and community lead and other things. But yeah, the team is the community is the best part of my job. The team is the second best.
It's a good answer. So, yeah, so tell us a little bit more about the types of services then that the Ceramic network now offers developers. You transitioned, all the effort is on it's on Ceramic now. Like, we I guess we've talked a little bit about, the data storage and stuff, but like if I'm building something brand new, like what sorts of data and stuff can I pull from Ceramic, and what does that actually look like to I guess to like implement it in my dApp?
Yeah. So Ceramic is basically a decentralized database, is the easiest way to think about it. And so it's a platform that developers use to manage, structure, and host the data that they need in their application. It's like what data? Well, not their value data, not their tokens, not their finance, because that goes on a blockchain, but
Right.
everything else. And the funny thing is, Web3, we've gotten used to there not being a whole lot else. Like Uniswap app is just like an interface on top of a contract, basically. But
Yeah.
if you think about any website, any app or product in Web 2, it's just data everywhere. That all needs to be stored somewhere and managed somehow. And you can't just do that directly on IPFS or Filecoin or Arweave. Those are great for like storing stateless bits, for just storing files that aren't going to change and then retrieving them.
Right.
And we actually use those as our long-term storage. You need a database layer. And that requires basically the ability to update and validate updates to data and structure it and have it access controlled. And so that's what Ceramic is a database layer built for the decentralized web. And one of the really powerful things you get from that, apart from it being user-centric, so users control their own data, the real value is the composability. So now this data is being stored on an open network the way tokens are stored on a blockchain, and users can bring it from app to app, and all these apps can build on the same data structures, the same data collections. And so it's what we talked about at the beginning of this interview is, instead of each app having their own social graph and their own set of data, now it's a shared set, and we can just innovate much faster and build on these collections much faster. And so, yeah, it's that database layer that just offers this whole new kind of world of composability that didn't exist before.
It seems to me like something like Mastodon would benefit tremendously from this, either integrating or maybe migrating entirely over, because it would probably remove a lot of infrastructure for them, and they've kind of already been kind of building on this idea of a decentralized social network. Well, not a decentralized social network. Uh, um, a network basically you can tailor to yourself. Like these are the people going to follow, and I've got lots of different interfaces I can use to access the same data. And basically it also makes this vision of a customized Twitter, right, where you can have a right wing Twitter and a left wing Twitter, and a pro gun Twitter and a pro gun control Twitter. Like you could pick your poison basically, and really customize your experience because all the data is already there. But of course, we know there's lots of money being poured into new solutions, by Jack Dorsey and some others. Like, uh, yeah, I guess I don't really have a question there. I just that it seems like the tech is already there and usable, and there are some applications that could actually build on this now, as opposed to continuing to hit the wall, with something like Mastodon, which never seems to really take off. And people like Jack Dorsey pounding on the Bitcoin maxi doors, and trying to do his own thing. So, like, do you have like active BD people like going out there to organizations like that and be like, guys, just come build on Ceramic. Like you can still add your own special sauce, but like everything's here.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So, we're trying to really lead with kind of developer support and build things that people need and serve those who are really looking for it. And so we don't have a big sales organization or anything like that. We do have great relationships with a lot of the folks that you mentioned, and Mastodon's a great example. Like they're kind of a forerunner to this idea of a peer-to-peer social network. There's some limitations in kind of how it's architected that we think Ceramic can kind of offer a a more elegant solution and a more scalable platform. Not in terms of necessarily volume and data, but just the types of features and the ways that you can use data on Ceramic that you can't on Mastodon today. And then on the I think they call it Web 5. We know that team quite well. Daniel and Gabe and many others there, and it's a lot of the same kind of underlying primitives, DIDs, and verified credentials. Um,
Yeah.
they have one vision of how this works that was kind of developed at Microsoft and is a little bit more, frankly, like at the end of the day, a bit more centralized than we believe makes sense, and a little bit more rigid in terms of the way that things have to be built. We're also
Mhm.
not Bitcoin maxis the way that the kind of Jack Dorsey led folks are, but the vision of the world is more shared than opposed with those guys, and we talk to them often.
Yeah. Yeah. I did. Somebody made a joke about how Jack Dorsey, took slides from Microsoft Ion's framework presentation a couple years ago, branded a web, and just created Web 5 out of it because it's actually the exact same sites now. And then somebody else made the point of, well, somebody who actually worked on that is now working for what's it called, TBD.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
but so I'm like, okay, but still, like, it's not. This is not new, and I know it's not new. You know it's not new. I know this is multi-year old work. And a lot of stuff that's gone into it. As you mentioned, the W3C and the Decentralized Identity Foundation and other organizations like that. So yeah, but for somebody who's been around long enough, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, it's just that, don't present it at new as new. Like, if that's what you're doing, cut that out. Tell me a little bit about like that ceramic network. So it's a distributed database. Is it its own blockchain? Is it, running on like a Cosmos or Polkadot type thing? Are there their own validators? Like, how does that actually work on the back end?
Yeah, so today Ceramic is a peer-to-peer network where anyone who wants to use it runs their own node, similar to IPFS. There is an altruistic network. We run nodes as $3 Labs, and others do as well. But if you really want to make sure the data is persisted, you run your own node. That is the current setup. In the future, there will be a fully decentralized, incentivized network to basically be validating the data transactions on the network and then making them available, basically hosting the network. That will be its own blockchain-like network in terms of it will have nodes that are incentivized to do this with a native token. It will be very different from a traditional blockchain in that there's no value happening on the Ceramic network. There's no tokens, there's no token transfers, there's no smart contracts. Um, what there is massive amounts of scale for data, which is very different than value.
Right.
Data is abundant, value is scarce. And so it has its own, we will use as much as we can from existing consensus mechanisms and the rest of the stack. Our philosophy is to do as little as we possibly can to meet developers' needs. And so we hope to build as little as possible, but it will need to be its own network and its own designed for data, which no one else has really done to date.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I like the, at least for now, taking that peer to peer mode, and like, yeah, I can run a box. I don't know, put up a couple hundred gigs of storage or something like that. Help the network and get my own data on there.
Yep.
So you've been part of, for lack of a better term, the DID space for several years now. You and I both saw this evolution from you doing your own thing with 3 Box, Bloom doing its own thing, Civic, Uport, etc. Eventually, and Microsoft, as a very large company, eventually everybody more or less coming together under a couple different standards bodies, and really coalescing around this idea of verifiable credentials and stuff like that. Now that I think is mostly set, like, it seems to be the same terminology all around, at least for decentralized identity platforms. I'm sure there are digital, non-decentralized ones who are still doing their own thing. Yoti comes to mind, who might not be, fully invested in the standards. Where do you see things kind of going from here over the next little bit? Obviously, you're starting to see some adoption. You guys are providing tools. Some of these companies have been around for a while now, and there's new ones still being formed or trying to build around reputation and stuff like that. Like, what do you see happening over the next, or what do you anticipate happening over the next few years as this continues to evolve?
Yeah, I don't think the conversation is over. The conversation around identity kind of goes in spurts every 18 months is what I've found. And basically the space hits a limit of what they can do without better versions of identity. And then everybody talks about identity for a bit and then it kind of goes away, usually in a bear market, and then comes back later. Um, I think the important thing actually has less to do with identity and more to do with data. I think the data stack is going to consolidate and mature in very short order now. Ceramic's a big part of it, but it is not the only part of it for sure. And by that I mean like, blockchains work. They have lots of problems, but people can deploy DeFi and NFT projects on a blockchain pretty dependably and build around that. The whole data stack to support the Web3 vision of composable user-centric data has not yet existed in a completely dependable way. And I think that Ceramic, we can still think of it as a kind of beta. It's a very early mainnet right now, peer-to-peer, not incentivized. That will change in some ways this summer. The graph gets more and more sophisticated for the kind of querying side of data. There's projects like Spruce and Privy and many others that we're working very closely with to make sure some of the core standards that are needed throughout the entire stack are kind of aligning. And that all goes all the way down to the Filecoin and Arweave's kind of raw storage. And that reliable infrastructure is going to let people build things they haven't been able to build before and have wanted to. The social networks, kind of Web3 social, really sophisticated collaboration tools. I think DAO tooling has become a meme, but really it's about better ways of collaborating across flexible groups. And so there's fantastic applications like Clarity and others who kind of are waiting for the data stack to be mature. And so that's what I think is going to happen next. And the way we think about it is first, it's data for developers to build on, and identity and reputation emerges out of data. Reputation is just an algorithm on top of a bunch of authentic data. Identity is really just your ability to control and govern and make use of all that data and those reputations. And so it's a little bit different that angle than people from kind of the diff identity world or the kind of pure token world come from. But I think that's the important trend we're going to see the next few months.
Okay, fair enough. I'm actually I do agree that it does, the discussions around identity and reputation seem to ebb and flow quite a bit. But I at Graph Day and Graph Hack, I actually heard quite a bit about it. So I'm not sure it's gone entirely away in this, you know, TradFi and DeFi bear market, or fully macro bear market, according to something I read the other day, where stocks are officially in bear market territory, but or yeah, bear market territory. And I'm like, yeah, but some of the best stuff we've seen in blockchain comes during these times, gets built during
Mhm.
these times, because the people who are actually building really cool fundamental stuff, or interesting stuff that wouldn't catch somebody's eye, during a bull market, um, they start to launch and iterate, and then new things catch on.
Yep.
Um, I would have to imagine that Ceramic Network then can play a role in metaverse data, right? Like land tiles, NFTs, a new head for Decentraland, new avatar head, stuff like that. Are you starting to see already applications like that being built on Ceramic, or do you have some interest at least of like, we want to put all this data on your stuff instead of a bunch of centralized servers at AWS or Azure?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a couple different things there. Like tokens should still stay on a blockchain. So if you're selling
Yeah.
PFPs, if you want like assets that are rare, that are scarce, that's not where ceramic comes in. Now those media files that might be behind those NFTs, those need a place to live, and those could go on ceramic. One of the really interesting things about ceramic is it's like any database, it's dynamic, mutable data. You can change it.
Hmm.
So that's really bad for a piece of art that you want to be static. It's really good for a whole bunch of other things that we haven't even gotten to explore yet because this capability didn't exist. And so there are, hacks around this and projects that get at this generative and dynamic art projects. But
Right.
what we've also seen is there's so many assets you want to put into like an NFT form that should change the content associated to it over time. A
Right.
very
Right.
simple example would be, an NFT piece of art that is changing, or a collectible that changes as a player's stats evolve. That's like a very basic one that kind of ties to early NFT projects. But
Yep.
much more than that is like NFTs to represent something in a supply chain, or certificates about NFT, and you can start to like add, the credentials or the authenticity or the other metadata about it to a ceramic stream. And so it's the combination of data that you would put in any kind of off-chain storage, and then that token itself that is really powerful. And so yes, the combo with NFTs is very powerful. And then there's all sorts of things that are happening in the metaverse or in games. The place in the game that you got to, the achievements you unlocked, the places that you moved, all the data, that your
Right.
profile information, your messaging, all of that is data that shouldn't be on chain. And so yes, we're definitely seeing an uptick there.
I'm thinking now of Krabata or however it's pronounced, the game on Avalanche, where uh, when some sort of event is happening, I've seen multiple times where, it's like Krabata, attack, attack, defend, defend, like all these transactions. I'm like, these should not be on chain transactions. Like attacking another character, yes, it's important to record it somewhere, but not a non-chain transaction. And I've seen multiple instances where Avalanche just slows to a crawl. You get 6,000 transactions in the queue, and it's only 50 per block that are actually being processed. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to wait because I don't know what else to do at this point. I don't want to jump ahead, and pay $5 or $6 for this transaction. It's just not worth it. It's not that important. I can wait, and it's not time sensitive, and
Yep.
and this one design choice is slowing down an entire blockchain that is supposed to be capable of doing like 1,000 TPS on the C chain. So yeah, I think that's a really good example of something that's like, yeah, it's recorded somewhere, not on the blockchain. I'm just wondering now, does this idea of bringing back mutable data, but to a decentralized network of some kind, does this reintroduce any of the risks or attack vectors and stuff like that because the data is mutable once again? And if not, like, what do you have in place to help defend against that?
Well, it's just you use it for different things. And so, is there a risk if so it's maybe I'll give an example, which is like usernames.
Hmm.
So uh, something like ENS is meant to be like globally unique, human readable names. And that you need a lot of confidence they're not changing. Like someone could swap usernames and sell it. And so it's not static forever. But you need a
Right,
lot of confidence that if I'm dezuck.eth, I need to know that you can't also become dezuck.eth just anytime that you want, right? Because then you can
right,
impersonate me, and people need to trust that like there is some reputation associated with that they can kind of hold on to. And so in that case, some of the properties of a blockchain are super important because you need this globally unique registry in this namespace. On Ceramic, I can set my profile name to Danny Zuckerman or to Zuck or whatever I want. So can you. They're completely independent. There's no globally kind of unique registry. There's nothing that enforces that
hmm,
uniqueness. It's just for a different purpose, right? Like, there's a lot of purposes where I need to be able to update my profile name from Danny to Danny in Denver to whatever, right? And people aren't banking on that username with the same kind of use case they are an ENS name. But
right,
that solves different problems, right? It lets us have a much more unique profile, lets us have a much more rich data set where there can be collisions where, I can go to the same school as you, or we can have the same interest, and that's not, an issue. And so it's really just for different use cases. Ceramic does a lot around kind of security and governance over data, and that only the controller of a piece of data, usually the user, but it could be something else, is allowed to update that data. So it's not like you can
okay,
come update my data, only I can update my data.
okay.
And so you can have rules and governance around the data that still gives you a lot of security. You just use it for very different use cases than you would use a blockchain for.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. That the controller part there was is really what I was looking for. So that's good to hear. Um, like, what are some of the biggest hurdles you think, especially teams building blockchain dApps, are facing now in terms of security and contracts over the next little while? Like we've seen all sorts of the same attacks happening over and over again. Um, yeah, like do you think that's going to continue to happen, or do you think we're at a point where now where like new tools are coming on, they can use that, or people can start to rely on other tech now, potentially like ceramic, depending on which part of the application they're looking to offload, to help secure against that.
So the kind of attacks and security of blockchains is definitely not my expertise, but I do think they're going to keep seeing that until everything is hardened. It's like that's how these systems get battle tested is they face battle. And I do think we'll move from a world that is all about these financial use cases to one that is much more about social and other kinds of use cases. And I think we've kind of been in the hyper financialization age of crypto and Web3. Um,
Yeah.
and I think and hope we move out of that pretty quickly now.
Do you consider yourself a regen then?
I haven't heard that term. I'm definitely not a
You
degen.
haven't?
No, I'm so far from
Oh,
that part of
okay.
the space. I am squarely Web3, not DeFi.
Okay, I'd say you probably qualify as a regen.
Okay.
You did you say you're in Denver?
No, but
Like,
for
oh,
conferences
okay.
frequently.
Oh, okay. Well, you said, the username might be Danny in Denver, so I thought maybe you live in
Yeah,
Denver because I was gonna say, well, then you should go chat with Kevin Owocki from Gitcoin because he is full on regen.
yeah.
Solar
We
punk vibes, all the rest.
Yeah, we share that. Kevin, yeah, I'll chill briefly. Gitcoin just came out with a really awesome product on top of Ceramic. That's the Gitcoin Passport, where they basically aggregated a whole bunch of proof of unique personhood. So proof of humanity and
Mm,
Bright ID and your Twitter name and your Facebook and your Google account into basically a single credential that gives you a score for how likely is it that this person is a unique person. And they rolled that out for this latest. I don't know when this show is going to go live, but Gitcoin grants round 14 just started. Go support public goods for Ethereum and Web3, but they rolled this out for their grants program and the matching behind it to make it more Sybil
yeah.
proof. And it's a really cool use case for Web3 reputation that Kevin and the Gitcoin team just launched after a lot of thinking and planning for that over the years.
Yeah, that's been a long time coming. I've done some work with the Gitcoin team, and I know they take the anti-Sybil side of things incredibly seriously. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else take it as seriously as they do. Probably because they are literally, taking your money and doling it out on a quadratic voting or quadratic funding type basis, and you really need to get it right then, because it's while it's not an investment, you are still messing with people's money, and I think we all know how people feel about that if you get that wrong. What other applications that are or have been built or are being built on Ceramic are you most excited about besides the Gitcoin passport?
Yeah, some of them I mentioned. Some of the ones I'm most excited about, I can't talk about quite yet because I don't want to steal their launch thunder. But I'm a huge fan of what Orbis is doing, Orbis.club. If you go there today, it looks a lot like a kind of decentralized Twitter with kind of more of a community aspect to it. They've been hosting great AMAs and giving projects their own communities, and it's very lively. The product is going to continue to evolve, and I'll let the founder Batiste share more there himself. But it's a really, really great example of decentralized social with a really firm understanding of what's going to work well in the future. And so, I think that like putting everything in and likes and posts and profiles in NFTs on chain just isn't going to scale. And Orbis will, and the product updates they have coming are really exciting. So that's one of my favorites. And then uh, we just talked about Gitcoin's kind of reputation or kind of proof of person to passport, but there's a whole bunch of different DAO tooling and collaboration tools building reputation on Ceramic. That ranges from like collab land and trying to kind of get DAO participation activity more codified and build reputation around that, to really big exchange that everybody knows issuing kind of KYC credentials, to um, you know issuing credentials for working groups or skills or achievements within a DAO, so you can kind of build your collaboration teams more effectively. And it's exciting just because DAOs can't scale without better reputation systems, and these are all composing together. So it doesn't have to be one done in a whole bunch of places. It all comes together. And so, yeah, those are some of the things I'm most excited about right now.
Cool. Yeah, I see Dow House has added ceramic for richer member profiles. I've one or two DAOs that use Dow House for as their tooling, as the term you've been using. Um, for I think Three Box Labs and the ceramic network, what are you looking forward to continuing to build or maybe release, depending on whether your roadmap is public or not, over the next year or so?
So the biggest thing we're working on right now is supporting some of the use cases that I talked about earlier better. And we will be sharing a lot more about this soon. But our team is really hard at work at kind of making ceramic look and act and work like a graph database, basically. Right now, the functionality is database-like, but it's not a full database, especially not for modeling relationships like social graphs or basically many-to-many connections. And we know that's what's needed in the space, by some of the social apps I talked about, by some of the reputation projects, by folks like DAO House that you just mentioned, which is kind of really doing amazing work bringing some of this stuff together. And so by the end of the summer, we hope that people can kind of use ceramic as a kind of fully tooled graph database with querying built in, which doesn't happen right now. And it won't be kind of a full query engine the way that the graph, which will index ceramic, will be, but it'll kind of make that side of things much easier. And it will let people model these relationships in more powerful ways, and then also make all of these data models that application developers build discoverable and usable and reusable by others, which will really aid the composability of the network. So that's the big focus right now. After that, in the fall and early next year, is starting to work on the incentivized network that we talked about earlier, so that
Yeah.
apps using Ceramic don't have to run their own node, is really the goal there.
Terrific. And I think you mentioned really early on, and you've written elsewhere that you're really interested in governance and coordination. Have we slayed Moloch? And if not, can we?
Yeah, uh, I don't believe we have by a long shot. I also don't believe we ever will, but I do believe that um, these technologies are the best coordination tools we've ever had. Moloch is a coordination problem, and so we can keep Moloch in check better. The thing that really makes me say that is um, it kind of in any system through history, we're always making trade-offs between centralized and decentralized, and the inherent trade-off is centralized systems are quite good at times at putting they're good at bias to action. They're good at giving people, potentially experts, a lot of authority to make decisions and putting the agency to do things where knowledge is. They're really bad at
Right.
keeping incentives aligned. And whether it's blatant corruption or just more disconnect from the populace to the decision maker, the incentives aren't aligned. Decentralized system incentives are more aligned. Everybody gets a say, but it's really hard to get things done. And it's really hard to elevate voices who actually know what they're talking about, which we usually want to do. And these public, transparent, incentivized systems give us a way to broker that trade-off between centralized and decentralized in ways that we've never been able to do before. To give weight to expertise, to credibility, to past performance, while keeping things transparent and keeping interests aligned. They're not perfect; they can't do it 100%, but they do it better than anything else out there. And so I'm very excited for that. I don't think we have slayed Moloch by a long shot yet because, among other reasons, almost all of the incentive design in the space today has been purely financial, and humans are motivated
Yeah.
by a lot more than just financial rewards. And so until we design for all of that, we're really short of the true promise of the technology.
Seems like a space where, especially on like the scientific research side of things, that would be ripe for disruption here, especially around reputation, looking at past performance, those sorts of things, and that's often a really black box, where you have to submit, you have to pay to submit your papers, you have to hope and pray that it actually gets reviewed and published and all this other stuff. And whereas there's alternatives now, but I think if they continue to build better alternatives than what's these highfalutin, very well regarded but very expensive research journals, that currently exist. Ceramic it sounds like a great tool to use there, along with some of the other stuff that's already being built on top of it. Danny, we're coming up to time, so I want to end it here. Thanks so much for your time again today. Really appreciate it. If people want to learn more about you, or keep up with your work, or ceramic specifically, where should they go?
So definitely follow Ceramic first. Twitter is definitely the best place for both Ceramic and myself. We are at Ceramic Network on Twitter. I am at Dazuck, Dazuck. And then our Discord, chat.ceramic.network. We're in there all the time. All the founders, all the core devs, the whole team, and the whole community is wide open discussion for technical stuff, for just talking Web3, building on composable data. Those are the best places to find us.
Terrific. I was going to make a joke about Mark Zuckerberg maybe potentially being angry that you've got Dazuck, but I don't know. Have you ever heard from him or met him?
No, no, I
No.
think there's a story behind the Zuck, but I'll save that for another time.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah, we're running out of time here. All right. Thanks again. And for everybody listening or watching, until next time, stay free.